the final example in the web programming basics, because these first few sections have gone through the basic HTML tags before the other sections introduce CSS, and then finally introduce the new aspects of HTML5 as compared to HTML. And one of the most common things you're going to use when making web pages are forms. Forms are what you encounter all the time when you're creating accounts online, or in any way entering data and then sending it to the web server. And so what I've done here is used some of the most common parts of a form, text boxes, as you can see here. That's what these are called, input type of text. And I've given them different names, so first name, last name. A field set is this line around used to group things in a form. And then we have a multi-line text box where you can enter a little bit more information. And then we have checkboxes where you can click on one or more items at a time and group those. And you have radio buttons, and this is where you can only pick one of a group. And then you have a select box, as it's called. You can select. And this one you can set where you can choose more than one as well. It's a drop-down box or a select. Then you have two types of button here. The one to the left is a normal button where nothing happens, and the one to the right is the actual submit button. That's the type of button that actually sends data to the web server. So I'm going to look at the code now. I decided to show the graphical interface first so you can see what relates to what here. So we go to the code. A little bit of formatting there in the style tag in the head, form example. Then, of course, the form is in the body. The form has two very important things. In this example, what typically happens with a form is that you send the data from the form to some type of server script. In this case, I'm sending it to a PHP file. And server scripts are dynamic in that they are not static, they're not fixed in nature, so that they can do things based on variables and so forth. I typically interact with databases. But all I'm going to do for this example is just show you how I can send the data to the server. So the PHP part you can just ignore. I'll show the code quickly. For those of you that are interested or already know a little bit more, you can further your studies. Otherwise, you can just accept it. There are two ways to post data. I'm not going to go into it, but it's either post or get. In this case, it's post. So there's two ways to send it. So action is where I'm sending it, and post, or the method, is how I'm sending it. Field set, as I said before, which is grouping around the grouping items. Legend is giving a name for the grouping, and then label is setting a name for the actual input. The input, there are different types. Input type text is what we saw as a text box, and all these are, of course, attributes that we're becoming more and more acquainted with now. So input type of text, name, first name, and I can set a length and a size that it appears. And as we see also, this input tag is a self-closing tag, like the line break tag, the image tag, and so forth. And so I have three of those, one for first name, one for last name, one for email. Then I have one that's hidden. You can see this value is that this is typically used to send data that is not shown directly to the user. So you don't actually see this tag in the page, but it's actually there. Password, we'll see when I type in that, type password. You've encountered this as well. It doesn't show the actual characters you type. It shows asterisk or some other symbol. Text area was the large box there. Given it the name address, address. And then we see the input type for checkbox, are those boxes where you can click in one or more, giving them the name, drink, and the values. And then type radio buttons, that was for the food, pick your favorite food, pizza, hamburger, or herring. Of course, herring is number one, right? And then finally, the color choice. Given the color, or the drop-down box in HTML, it uses a select tag, and the select tag is then filled with options. You open and close the option, and then you fill it with all the options you want. Then finally I have the two buttons. The input type of button is a normal button. Usually use these type of buttons to interact with JavaScript. You can click on and then you can listen to that event, as it's called, and make something happen in your page. But in this case, what we want is a submit button, and it works in a way that it actually takes all the data that we've entered in the form, according to all these values, creates variables, and then it sends it to this script. And we can look at that quickly. I'm going to jump to it. You can't see the script on the code online, but the script, it sends out a bit of HTML, and then we can see here in this section, enclosed in the PHP tag. Here. A bunch of code, I'm not going to go into any detail, where I have variables where I can read the information sent. It's connected to the name values in my form, first name, last name, and so forth. And I can read what's sent out. And so if we test the form data, just fill some stuff in here. I'm not going to take any time to see, it just puts in some symbols and say I like to drink everything. I'll say herring and the color green. And say if I do go, nothing happens. But if I do submit, it sends the data. And as you can see with the PHP script, we can see I've sent the data to the next page. This page was generated dynamically. Of course, it'll change depending on what you write in the previous form. And so it sent everything. I just wrote some nonsense there. My address was nonsense. I liked herring and the color green. So I don't, of course, expect you to experiment with server scripts and PHP. What you can do is download the code for the form and experiment with all the different elements in a form. And of course, practice once you've studied the CSS, the style sheet portion of the course, to style them so they look a little nicer than mine. Okay.